Good afternoon or good morning still here on the West Coast, on the East Coast. I'm on the East Coast today. I call this meeting to order. The quorum is present without objection. The chair is authorized to declare recess at any time as they take the feedback machine out of the room. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some items for our remote hearing. First, if you are experiencing connectivity issues, please make sure you or your staff contact our designated technical support so that these issues can be resolved immediately. Members participating remotely must continue to remain visible on camera for the duration of their participation in the hearing, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical issues that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. It is committee policy that members participating remotely will remain muted when not recognized, just like turning your microphone on and off during an in-person hearing. Now, this is out of courtesy to all members on the committee so that the background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. When you are recognized to speak, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for 2 to 3 seconds before speaking so that your words are captured on the live stream. If you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and have your staff email the document to veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded to the committee document repository. Now, without objection, all members will be recognized in order of seniority for questioning witnesses today, and this will make it easier for me to ensure all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. Does any member have a question about the procedures for this hearing? Hearing none, we'll proceed. I'll now recognize myself for an opening statement. Well, good morning. I call this hearing to order. Welcome to our Bipartisan Member Day hearing. Ranking Member Bost and I are pleased to have the opportunity today to hear testimony from more than 20 members. Actually, I heard the number was 24 members of the House of Representatives who will present their ideas and speak about legislation they have introduced to help improve the lives of our nation's veterans. I'm pleased to see that so many members are with us today, and I understand that their testimony will cover a range of topics, including access to mental health care, toxic exposure, and transition assistance. Hearing their ideas will help inform the committee's work, developing legislation and conducting oversight to address the chronic challenges that many veterans face. Every member of Congress has constituents who are veterans, and we are approaching Memorial Day. As we are approaching Memorial Day, we have several members on the House Veterans Affairs Committee and those appearing before us who have served and are currently serving in the armed services. Our committee staff, both majority and minority staff, is comprised of veterans as well. Let me just take a moment to acknowledge the veterans who serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee and those veterans that are speaking before us today, and actually those who are continuing to serve in our military. First of all, our ranking member, Mike Bost. I have to be sure that I mentioned that he served in the Marine Corps. And he comes from a distinguished military family. Representative Connor Lamb, also a Marine. General Jack Bergman. I don't know whether he's mostly a Marine, but I'll say he's a Marine, even though he served in the Army National Guard. Forgive me, General Bergman, if I've made any kind of slight there, but you are a true blue Marine. Representative Elaine Luria, U.S. Navy. Representative Jim Banks, U.S. Navy Reserve. Representative Khalili Gregorio Sablan, U.S. Army Reserve. Representative Troy Nels, U.S. Army Reserve. Representative Anthony Brown, U.S. Army and U.S. Army Reserve. Dr. Marionette Miller Meeks, U.S. Army and U.S. Army Reserve. Representative Ruben Gallego, U.S. Marine Corps. Representative Mikey Sherrill, U.S. Navy. Representative Brad Wenstrup, U.S. Army Reserve. Representative Vern Buchanan, U.S. Army National Guard. And Representative Kai Kahele, U.S. Army National Guard. And Representative Lee Zeldin, who submitted a statement for the record won't be here today, but I want to acknowledge his military service, U.S. Army and U.S. Army Reserve. And we all recognize that freedom is not free. So let me thank all of you, my colleagues, for volunteering to serve your country. I thank all the service members who are currently serving and those who are veterans on our committee, both majority and minority, in terms of our staff. Today's Member Day hearing is a critical opportunity for the committee to gather input on veterans policy from members on both sides of the aisle, representing a diverse cross-section of communities across the nation. Last Congress, we secured several important wins for veterans, including passing the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, the Deborah Sampson Act, the Commander John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Care Improvement Act, and my bill, the Veterans Compact Act. And earlier this year, we came together again to pass the American Rescue Plan to ensure VA has the funds it needs to continue serving our veterans throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and help get our veterans back to work. And just last week, the House passed 10 bipartisan committee bills that will help build equity for all veterans, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, or housing status. It will strengthen oversight of VA and COVID-19 relief dollars and expand mental health care resources for veterans, especially in rural areas. I'm very proud of these accomplishments, but there's still so much more work to do. As VA continues to confront the COVID-19 pandemic, our committee will work to create a more welcoming VA and build equity for veterans, reduce veteran suicide, address toxic exposure, ensure student veterans receive quality education, advocate for women veterans, modernize VA, support VA's long-term care facilities, improve VA's management and oversight, and ensure our legislative reforms are implemented effectively. I look forward to hearing from members from both sides of the aisle about legislation to address these important priorities, and I hope today's Member Day hearing will serve as an opportunity for us to better advocate for veterans across the country. With that, I will now recognize Ranking Member Bost for any opening remarks he may have. Ranking Member, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it's an honor to attend today's Member Day for the first time as the lead Republican in on this committee. And you know, as the chairman mentioned, I am a proud Marine veteran, and in serving on this committee on behalf of my brothers and sisters in arms and future generations of service members, is not a duty that I take lightly. However, achieving real success for the men and women who raise their right hand and serve our nation is not a mission that can be done completely alone. We must work together to address the issues that affect veterans in all 50 states and territories and around the world. They deserve no less. Member Day gives us the opportunity to hear from members that represent those veterans, whether on our committee or not, about the issues affecting them and their districts. Veterans come from every race, background, and creed. A veteran in Arizona may not be facing the same hurdles as a veteran in Georgia. That's why I'm excited to see so many of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle participating in today's hearing. Their advocacy on behalf of veterans and their families and survivors is vitally important. I'm eager to hear from them about the solutions and proposals that they have to ensure every veteran has the opportunity to live in the American dream. And with that, we understand how vitally important it is to hear from each one of our members. And with that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I now am pleased to recognize our first panel, beginning with Representative Welch, a good friend of mine from the state of Vermont. Mr. Welch will, I now call upon you to make your presentation.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to talk about burn pits. But before I do, I just want to say to you, Mr. Chairman, and to you, Mr. Ranking Member, and each of the committee members, I really, really appreciate you making yourself available for Member Day. It's just so wonderful for me when I'm talking to veterans here to be able to say to them that I'll be talking to you. So you'll hear what I say about burn pits, but just please know that what you're doing as a committee is really appreciated by the veterans. And Ranking Member Bost, you said it very well as you did, Mr. Chairman. So thank you on my behalf, but I know all the members of Congress feel that way. Burn pits is a big issue, and I know your committee has been doing a lot on it, but it's been really significant in Vermont. A couple of reasons. Vermonters, on a per capita basis, actually had more casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan than any other state. We're a small state, we're a rural state, and as you know, it's a kind of state where folks step up and want to serve their country. We had two beloved members who lost their lives as a result of cancer that appear very much to have been caused by their service in Afghanistan in the vicinity of burn pits. And when Sergeant Major Mike Cram died in 2017 with cancer, his widow, Pat Cram, gathered the unit that he was with, and 3 other members also have cancer, and began advocating to do something about burn pits. The following year, Brigadier General Mike Heston, who had several tours of duty in Afghanistan, also died, and his widow, June Heston, has also become extremely active. Those burn pits, we don't know what is being burned, but we know it's a lot of toxic stuff, and we know that a lot of people in the vicinity have become ill. We've made some progress. There's a permanent end to the use of burn pits, but there are some burn pits still operating in host countries, so we're reducing the exposure. We've improved the registry, and that's something that we have to continue doing. And Congressman Ruiz, Dr. Ruiz and I have 2 bills that we're going to be reintroducing, the Reducing Exposure to Burn Pits, and also the improvement of the Registry of Burn Pit Registry Act that expands eligibility for our service members who served in Syria and Egypt. Finally, Dr. Ruiz has introduced a presumption of service connection. If you have an illness and you served in the vicinity of a burn pit, cancer-related illness, that bill would have a presumption of disability, much like ultimately happened with Agent Orange. I want to thank you for your for the progress we've made. NDAA in 2020 ended burn pits and gave location and required giving the location list to the VA. And we want to continue making that progress. So the advocacy that you do on behalf of the veterans is going to make a huge difference on getting more people to sign up for the registry, to give us more data, to reinforce the ban on the use of burn pits, which are very, very toxic. And that would go a long way towards 2 things. One, providing medical assistance to those of our service members who did become ill serving in the vicinity of burn pits. But 2, which I know just this hearing is an indication of, reinforcing the appreciation and the admiration and the debt of gratitude each and every one of us owes to our service members. So, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member and committee members, thank you so much for the opportunity to convey this message to you on behalf of Vermont veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Welch. I now recognize Representative Whitman from the state of Virginia. Representative Whitman, you're recognized.
Myself. All right. Thank you, Chairman Takano and Ranking Member Bost. I appreciate your service, and thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee. I want to thank the committee members too for your extraordinary commitment to our nation's veterans. We truly need to do everything possible to make sure that we're supporting them. It's my pleasure to testify on behalf of the nearly 750,000 veterans who call the great Commonwealth of Virginia home. Over 8.5% of Virginia's population is served in the military, and this places Virginia in the top 5 amongst states and commonwealths in the nation. 20% of Virginia's economy is in the defense industry, and the defense industry maintains a writ large commitment to employing veterans, an incredibly important partner in making sure we're doing everything we can to support our veterans. And our veterans are a part of what makes Virginia, but also our nation, very remarkable. And I'm sure my colleagues from other delegations can say the same for their respective states. Federally, we do much to ensure the well-being of over 20 million veterans across the nation. But as we know, there's always room for improvement. 55% of our veterans are over the age of 60, which creates a significant need and also challenge for us. We have to get Veterans Affairs right, because these 55% need us most. The others need veterans benefits and the care of the Veterans Administration, but those 55% are right there at the top of the list. And I'd like to take just a few moments to highlight legislation that I've introduced to this effect. First is H.R. 182, the Veterans Choice and Accountability Act, which aims to improve healthcare within the Department of Veterans Affairs by requiring the Secretary of the VA to evaluate the hospital care, medical services, and nursing home care to determine, are they doing everything possible to serve the needs of the veterans? The Secretary is then required to submit to Congress an evaluation of the implementation of the VA budget and Choice Improvement Act. Incredibly important to make sure we're doing everything we can for our veterans. And I know how tirelessly the Department of Veterans Affairs works, but I also recognize that there are gaps in coverage. While H.R. 182 looks for a top-down audit of effectiveness, H.R. 183 presents an opportunity for grassroots change. H.R. 183, the Veterans Collaboration Act, creates a 2-year pilot program on collaboration with nonprofits, such as veteran service organizations and educational institutions that provide pro bono legal advice. These organizations have, through their experience and their efforts, ground intel on the real needs of veterans that may not be readily apparent to those who have not served this nation in one of our service branches. It's imperative that we look at all opportunities to open up avenues for collaboration and look for those that are willing to help, especially schools that have law schools that have veterans there or active duty military there in their student population that are willing and able to give that legal advice. Finally, H.R. 185, the Veterans Affairs Transfer of Information and Sharing of Disability Examination Procedures with DoD Doctors Act. Wow, that's a mouthful. But it really is about obligating care providers to be referred to separating service members to a healthcare provider certified by the Department of Veterans Affairs if they have a condition that would make them eligible for disability, and establishes a shared medical record systems between VA and DoD Health. Now, I know we hear all the time that those systems exist, but they're incomplete. And we want to make sure too, we're properly transitioning veterans as they leave the military, whether it's through retirement or through separation. Every single person in this hearing has had a constituent who has slipped through the cracks with respect to disability eligibility. I believe that this effort in H.R. 185 will shore up this institution and make sure we make that connection as our active duty military transition out of the military. I'd like to end with stating my appreciation for the sheer size and scope of the Veterans Affairs mission. They have a tremendous challenge in front of them. They've done a lot, but there's still more to do. There are many things that we need to do too as members of Congress, and working in conjunction with each other, with the committee, and also with our federal agencies, both the Department of Veterans Affairs, but also the Department of Defense. And this total commitment to excellence gives us the bandwidth to improve all of the efforts that we put forward for our veterans. And I hope we can do more during this 117th session of Congress. And Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, thank you so much for all of your efforts. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you too to the commitment and dedication of all the members of the committee. We appreciate what you all are doing. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Whitman, for presenting your ideas. I was taking notes. Thank you so much for your commitment to our veterans. And I now want to turn to recognizing Representative Tlaib, the gentlewoman from Michigan, for her presentation. Representative Tlaib, you are now recognized.
Thank you so much. Good morning to many of you, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member, and members of the committee. I'd like to personally thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of my neighbors, many of which are honorable veterans, service members, and their families, again, that live in the Michigan's 13 district strong. I know ahead of Memorial Day, in which we honor those lives lost while in service of our country, I'd like to use this time to shine a light on the pervasive issue of our government not honoring our veterans who are able to make it home and are facing unbelievable challenges. It has long been customary to say, quote, "Thank you for your service" when greeting a veteran or a service member. It's important, but those I represent would like me to tell you, and they have told me a number of times, they have long been tired of being thanked with empty words. They want meaningful policy actions. When we look at the difficulty in transitioning to civilian life, it is glaringly clear that our government is not taking bold action to ensure that they are able to do so happily and healthy. In 2018, about 18 veterans a day took their own lives. The unemployment rate for veterans, especially our younger ones that are coming from some of the most recent wars, rose even as the national unemployment fell at the start of the year. And veterans make up 8%, y'all, only 8% of the country's homeless population, despite making up only 6% of the overall population. Words, parades, federal holidays are simply not enough to take care of the people who left their families and put a hold on their lives to serve our country. Orlandis Lawrence, an Army National Guard veteran I represent, certainly agrees with me. Mr. Lawrence was injured in an accident in the line of duty, but when he applied for disability in 2009, he was denied. Years later, he was finally able to get 70% service-connected disability rating for a shoulder condition acquired in that accident. To this day, he is still fighting for 100% disability, in large part because the system is inexcusably slow. In June of last year, he filed an appeal, but did not receive a reply from Veterans Appeal Board until April of this year, 10 months later, merely only acknowledging that their office failed to issue a determination on his case. So Mr. Lawrence says he feels left behind, and I'm sure countless other veterans my fellow colleagues that we represent across the country also do. Our veterans who were convinced that they would serve our country and that our country would ensure that we would take care of them are finding out that this promise was not upheld. In my district alone, Chairman, over 20% of veterans 18 years and older have service-connected disability rating. How many of them are waiting right now, or sitting and stuck, waiting and aching just to hear back on their cases like Mr. Lawrence has? You know, it doesn't matter, because even one to me is too many. Those who served our country, no questions asked, should not have to come back and fight their own government for health care that they not only need, but was hard earned. Finally, while hiring at the Department of Veteran Affairs may have jumped 37% in the last year, an attempt to close such wide gaps in communication, quality of service to our veterans must also be raised. So it's important and it's critical. I'm asking you all to please support a bipartisan legislation to address serious shortcomings with our VA patient advocates. These are folks that can help our veterans go through the processes of getting access and figuring out why it has been so slow and inaccessible to get services. And you all know these services must also be two-pronged, focusing on both physical and mental health issues that afflict many of our veteran neighbors. And I say this to you, my first 2 months on as a member of the United States Congress, we were on a phone for over an hour with one of our veterans until people can show up to help him because he wanted to take his life. It is the fact that some of the deepest, most enduring wounds of our brave service members will suffer in their years of service and after are mental. And the mental health challenges often go unseen to those around them, but could cost them their jobs, homes, families, if left untreated. And they have been for far too long. So again, thank you again for this opportunity to speak to you today. I look forward to working with all of you to see to that, again, our veterans are thanked with meaningful action, not just words, and that the stigma around mental health treatment ends. Thank you so much, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Lee. And you remind us with your story of being on the phone with a veteran who was wanting to take his own life, the important role that members of Congress and their staff play in services in the district. And so I just want to remind all folks who might be watching, your member of Congress is an advocate for you when you are having frustration. So thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you for focusing us on patient advocacy. I now call upon Representative Henson from Iowa, the state of Iowa, for 5 minutes. Representative Henson.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify before you today during the House Veterans Affairs Committee's Member Day hearing. I'm not on the committee. I really just appreciate the opportunity to share with you Iowans' priorities when it comes to supporting our veterans. And Mr. Chair, I heard you mention obviously the veteran members. So I know Iowans are well represented with Dr. Miller Meeks serving on this committee. But I just wanted to add a little bit to that conversation by sharing with you some of the stories that I have heard from here in Iowa's 1st Congressional District. Last week, I was honored that 2 of the bills that I helped introduce passed the House with overwhelming bipartisan support. One of those bills targets sexual harassment and assault within the Department of Veterans Affairs, so that VA employees have a safe work environment and can focus on their job of serving our veterans. I'd like to thank Congressman Pappas, who I saw on earlier, for co-introducing that and helping get that across the finish line. I'm confident that that bill will be considered by the Senate soon. And the other bill that I was proud to have passed the House last week was the Sergeant-Ketchum Rural Veterans Mental Health Act. As you know, Mr. Chairman, this bill was named after a veteran from here in Iowa who was denied that service at a local VA and tragically ended his life shortly after he was turned away. He had those war wounds that were not visible, and unfortunately, he paid the price. I believe this bill is absolutely essential, and I thank the committee for helping to advance this critical legislation. But again, it's only the first step. I'm also here today to talk to you about veterans' access to care, specifically in rural areas. While all of our veterans need and deserve our support, especially when it comes to their mental health, this support can be extremely difficult to access for veterans in rural communities, like many of the communities that I represent. In rural communities, veterans often have to drive long distances, travel to major cities, which can be triggering on its own with bigger population densities and the stress that goes with that. They oftentimes have to take time off of work if they've re-entered the civilian sector, or wait weeks or months for care. And I'm not listing just the barriers to access. These are real barriers, real troubling challenges for veterans who are suffering from mental health challenges like depression, PTSD, anxiety, and more. It's hard enough for some of our veterans to make that decision to seek help, ask for that help. We don't need to make it any harder for them to actually get the help that they are seeking. I know this is an issue because one veteran in my district explained to me just how hard it is to make those decisions after experiencing combat trauma and PTSD, and just how hard it is to book an appointment, let alone leave the house and drive several hours to an appointment, sit in a waiting room surrounded by unfamiliar faces, on edge. We have to legislate with those veterans in mind. The ones who most need the support are the ones who have the hardest time getting it. So earlier this year, I had the privilege of visiting Retrieving Freedom in Waverly. It's a nonprofit. It's an organization dedicated to training service dogs for veterans, and they also help kids with autism. Service dogs are trained to meet the specific needs of an intended human partner. They're a true match. The dogs undergo a rigorous training program that lasts more than 2 years. They learn how to perform specific chores and tasks, but they also offer companionship and unconditional love, according to the organization. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I saw that companionship and unconditional love when I met Tracer and his human, Sergeant Trent Dirks. Sergeant Dirks served our country honorably in the U.S. Army, deploying to Afghanistan in 2010 and returning home to the U.S. after seeing the unimaginable horrors during his tour in Northeast Afghanistan. And upon his return to Iowa, Sergeant Dirks did struggle with PTSD, an inability to sleep, depression. He watched 2 friends with whom he was deployed take their own lives. He thought about it himself, and then he found Retrieving Freedom, where he was paired with Tracer. The story of a soldier who needed support and wasn't getting it elsewhere isn't new, unfortunately. What is new is the way that Tracer sat with his back up against Trent's legs when he told me this story, ensuring that his owner knew nobody could come up behind him. So I met Trent and Tracer after years of their journey together, after Tracer accompanied Trent to a veterans hospital to get intensive treatment. giving him the confidence to be in public. And according to Trent, Tracer has helped boost his spirits and return happiness to his life again. So Tracer goes home with Trent every night. They live together, they care for each other. He has that constant support system, and it means he can live his life again. So I encourage this committee to think about innovative solutions to the challenges our veterans face, especially in our rural communities. We have to support and encourage nonprofits like Retrieving Freedom to continue their incredible work. So I'd ask the committee work with me in this bipartisan way to support the increase to accessibility of service dogs like Tracer for our veterans. Thank you, and I'd welcome any questions from the committee. But again, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Representative Henson. Certainly, we appreciated your work on helping us get the legislation on sexual assault and expanding healthcare to rural veterans. And we know that there's tremendous support within the Congress on service dogs and access. And we just passed major legislation related to that as well. But we know that there's still more to go there. And we appreciate your interest and your commitment to veterans. And so thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I now want to call upon a good friend and colleague from the state of New York, Representative Higgins. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the opportunity to testify today. Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurological disease that can rapidly affect life quality. It currently affects more than 1 million Americans. The Department of Veterans Affairs estimates that 110,000 veterans have been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. While the exact causes of Parkinson's are unknown, many veterans develop the disease after exposure to Agent Orange and other chemicals while serving our nation. There is no cure for Parkinson's. While medications can help slow the disease's progress, treatment options are very limited. But we do know that one of the most effective tools against Parkinson's isn't a medication at all. It's physical exercise. While there are many different types of exercises that have been shown to be effective against Parkinson's, patients in Western New York in my district find that boxing, yes, boxing, has been particularly helpful in slowing and even reversing the effects of their illness. Unfortunately, boxing training and classes remain inaccessible for many Parkinson's patients, including many veterans. For example, my constituent, Dr. Patrick Welsh, a retired Marine Corps veteran, was recently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease as a result of his exposure to Agent Orange during his service in Vietnam. Dr. Welsh's physician recommended that he seek therapy at Parkinson's Boxing, a boxing gym in Buffalo, New York. This gym is dedicated to offering boxing therapy to people with Parkinson's. Their training protocol has been developed for those with Parkinson's, and they have seen remarkable results with patients of all ages and all stages of the disease. Parkinson's Boxing Program has been endorsed by the Director of Movement Disorder Clinic at the VA Hospital and Western New York Healthcare System. My predecessor, former Congressman Jack Quinn, and his brother, Jeff, have spoken publicly of the benefits of boxing to alleviate symptoms associated with Parkinson's. Given Dr. Welsh's physicians has deemed this therapy to be necessary under the Missions Act's community care provision, this should be a covered service. Yet, despite all the evidence, the VA would not cover the cost of Dr. Welsh's therapy because Parkinson's boxing is not recognizable as a billable service. Mr. Chairman, I strongly believe veterans should be able to seek care at facilities like Parkinson's Boxing as a covered VA benefit. The VA acknowledges the benefits of the exercise on Parkinson's disease, and we must not allow the red tape to get in the way of veterans' ability to access the therapy they need. Mr. Chairman, in closing, I urge this committee to please consider the matter further, and I look forward to working with you on ways we can make innovative treatments for diseases like Parkinson's accessible to all veterans. Thank you, and I yield back, sir.
Well, thank you, Representative Higgins, for that very intriguing presentation. I looked over at my health staffer, and we're we're intrigued and we'll be looking into this. So thank you so much. And I thank you for your commitment to our veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'll call upon a very good friend and colleague, Representative Meng from the state of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about my bill, HR 1585, the Mark Takai Atomic Veterans Healthcare Parity Act. Mr. Chairman, this is a bill that is especially personal to me and many of us, as it was named after our dear friend and colleague, Representative Mark Takai, who previously and originally carried this bill. HR 1585 would permit veterans who participated in the nuclear cleanup of Inuit Atoll to be treated as radiation exposed veterans. Specifically, my bill would allow service members who performed the largest nuclear cleanup ever undertaken to receive the medical care they now need for service-connected cancers and diseases, and receive service-connected compensation benefits. Current law only covers service members who participated in active nuclear tests, not those who participated in the cleanup, and this is simply wrong. Roughly 4,000 troops helped clean up the Inuit Atoll between 1977 and 1980. Most did not even wear shirts, let alone respirators. These cleanup veterans, many of whom faced a long list of cancers and other deadly illnesses, are mostly gone today. Groups that track them estimate that there are only about 400 of these veterans left. These survivors, who are now in their late 50s and 60s, have cancer and are fighting for their lives. My hope is that Congress will finally right this wrong and help these individuals who sacrificed their youth and health in service of this great nation. I'm grateful for the strong bipartisan support of my bill. I'm especially thankful to you, Mr. Chairman, for your support, and I urge this committee for full consideration of my measure. Once again, thank you, Chairman Takano and Mr. Ranking Member Bost, for your leadership in upholding our nation's moral duty and promise to strengthen the health and safety of American veterans and their families. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Meng, for carrying on this legacy of Mark Takai. And I have personally met with some of these veterans, and their stories are heartbreaking. And I'm very hopeful that we'll try to get this in. In fact, I'm very positive that it's included in our comprehensive toxic exposure bill. Your bill has been something that's been on my conscience and on my mind since Mr. Takai brought it forward, and I'm very grateful that you carried it forward, and I'm very hopeful it's going to get done in this Congress. So thank you. I now want to turn to recognizing a very, very special colleague from the state of Texas, my friend, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so very much for your kindness and generosity, and thank you for allowing me to come forward this morning, and as well for your generosity and the time. Your committee is a very important committee for so many of us, and thank you for holding this hearing as we move into the Memorial Day, which of course is to mourn our dead, but we know that we celebrate with our living and our veterans. And so I wanted to come this morning to be able to talk of your incredibly important work. And thank you to Ranking Member Bost for helping to deliver the nation's veterans the best services they can. On the battlefield, the military pledges to leave no soldier behind must be continued when they come back. As a nation, let it be our pledge that when they return home, no veteran is ever left behind. I understand that my entire statement will be made part of the record, so I'll keep my remarks brief. But I do want to take these few minutes to highlight several important issues. The Buddy Check Week is legislation that I've offered previously. At the outset, I invite all members to join me as co-sponsors of HR 3405, the Buddy Check Week, and I would hope that this committee would review this bill and have it moved to the floor. I've introduced it, which provides support and training to organize outreach events and educate veterans on how to conduct peer wellness checks and recognize signs of problems in fellow veterans that indicate suicide risk. We know over the years that we have found and determined that our veterans have a high rate of suicide. This is almost like the buddy check on the battlefield. And I believe that a specific legislative initiative to create a extended program out of the Veterans Administration to have our fellow veterans help each other will be very helpful. The Buddy Check Act directs the Secretary of Veterans Affairs in consultation with veterans, nonprofits that serve veterans, mental health experts, and members of the armed forces to develop and implement collaborative education opportunities for veterans to learn how to conduct wellness checks. The VA will provide online or in-person training to individuals, as well as provide opportunities for Veterans Service Organizations, VSO, to learn how to train individuals to conduct peer wellness checks, transfer phone calls to the Veterans Crisis Line, and be resilient with handling a veteran in crisis. The bill is modeled after the American Legion's Buddy Check National Week of Calling, held March 11th to March 16th in 2019. And the American Legion unveiled this new initiative to connect past and present veterans and ensure that they receive the care they need. A Buddy Check Week will provide the time, space, and resources to help these veterans. I would hope from the Buddy Check Week, however, that we'd have the opportunity to create this program long-term. Veterans homelessness, Mr. Chairman, like members of the committee, I believe reducing and eliminating the homelessness among veterans should also be one of the nation's highest priorities. I believe the Biden administration is keenly aware, and they have selected a Secretary of Veterans Affairs that will join us in this effort. Your committee and your leadership have been stupendous in helping. Homelessness among the American veteran population is on the rise in the United States. We must be proactive in getting back to those who have given so much to us. That is why I request the committee to continue support for the Veterans Administrative Supportive Housing, VASH, that provides case management services, adequate housing facilities, mental health support, and address other areas that contribute to veterans' homelessness. VASH is jointly administered permanent supportive housing for disabled veterans experiencing homelessness, in which VA medical centers provide referrals. Let me, Mr. Chairman, emphasize that we have a very defined homeless problem here in my congressional district in the city of Houston. I represent the heart of downtown Houston, and there are places where it is Camp City. One of the things that we should be sensitive to is veterans who don't want to come in, who are suffering from a mental crisis as well. There, I believe, out of the VASH program, and I know it's there should really be a ramping up of those professionals to be able to help veterans. They may not come in on the first outreach, second outreach. They have to be documented as to where they are, even though there's movement. But in these camps, they mostly stay for a period of time to work with them, as opposed to making a first outreach and possibly not being able to get them. There are also, I think, should be added to this, is a attempt to reach the family members of these veterans. There should be some special expertise as well to connect these family members and their veterans. Many family members don't know where they are and would be willing to be helpful to them. I think that is very important. Today in our country, there are 107,000 veterans, male and female, who are homeless on any given night, and perhaps twice as many, 200,000, at some point during the course of the year. And many other veterans are considered near homeless or at risk because of the poverty, lack of support from family and friends, and dismal living conditions in cheap hotels and overcrowded or substantial housing. In my hometown of Houston, as I've said, for example, in recent years, the number of homeless veterans increased from 771 to 1,162, and that number may not be accurate. They keep going up. The plight of homelessness among veterans was only exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic, which is still with us. So providing a home for our veterans is crucial. In 2019 alone, 35,905 veterans lived in public housing provided by VASH, and I've seen the impact of such grants in my home state. We need to simply do more. In Texas, there are committed groups in Houston working to eradicate the issue of homelessness. For example, the Michael E. DeBakey VA Medical Center has been involved in changing veterans' lives in a mighty way by providing veterans and their families with access to affordable housing. Again, I emphasize veterans. Let me conclude with these support advocacy that I have championed, helping encourage real opportunities for veterans. And that is the Transitioning Heroes Act, which I intend to reintroduce in this Congress, which amends the IRS to allow employers a business-related tax credit for $1,000 times the amount of veterans who begin work under their employment. And we must keep our promises to the nation. Securing veterans' rights to their inventions and discoveries. I intend to introduce the Innovation Act, HR 3309, that was previously introduced, to include a provision requiring the patent officer to evaluate the economic impact of the Innovation Act on the ability of veteran-owned small businesses to secure their right to their inventions and discoveries. Let's encourage the talent that we have. Ensuring jobs and energy for veterans. I want to ensure that as we go into renewables and have the opportunity for enhanced training, that we have veterans included in that effort. And I hope that there will be support as I introduce these bills. Guaranteeing mental health counselors to meet the long-term needs of our armed forces, veterans and their families. I previously talked about that with respect to the idea of homeless veterans. Increasing PTSD funding. Yes, we have been very supportive, but as I've come across veterans, I can assure you that PTSD is not going away, and we should continue to focus on it and create it. Let me also share a story of a deported veteran, who was deported even though he had combat-related injuries. Miguel Perez, a Mexican native who grew up in Chicago, enlisted in the military, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, where he suffered traumatic brain injury. When he returned home, he struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and battled depression, and ultimately was involved in the prison system. The conviction triggered deportation proceedings, and after a year in an immigration detention center, he was deported to his home country. This left him living alone thousands of miles from his family. What we need to do is have an extra component to the immigration system to deal with veterans. Finally, my concluding remarks are even though this is not veterans, but let me just provide this information, and that is to the academies that ultimately young people go through. And this just shows that anyone who's involved in the military, we should have special concern for. The academies previously have not had any focus on challenges that cadets may have who've been admitted to the academy, such as stuttering or other challenges that could be handled. And I faced that with one of my cadets who ultimately went through the entire academy, Navy Academy, and at the end finished his training, and at the end indicated that he could no longer continue because he was a stutterer, rather than assessing him during the time that he was in the academy. I only say this, Mr. Chairman, I'm concluding, is let us help our veterans, and I thank you very much for allowing me to present today.
Thank you, Representative. I now will go to Representative Cloud of Texas. Let's try to keep it to 5 minutes. Members?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you, members for taking the time to hear from member initiatives. Really appreciate it. As we know, good care starts with good doctors, and with everything our veterans have sacrificed for our country, the responsibility falls on us to carry through on the promises we have made to them. There are many doctors in the VA who work to serve our veterans, and unfortunately, there are still a few doctors who should not be entrusted with the care of our veterans. In February of 2019, a report from the Government Accountability Office indicated that several VA facilities had physicians and other practitioners on payroll with either suspended or revoked medical licenses. In another example, the VA Office of Inspector General found that a urologist at a VA facility in Iowa was prescribing drugs without a Drug Enforcement Administration registration. My bill, the Improving Confidence in Veterans Care Act, would ensure that the VA is hiring and keeping only practitioners with credentials that are in good standing. For starters, this bill would require the VA staff to regularly review the credentials of all healthcare practitioners in its system. Physicians who prescribe drugs must be registered with the DEA. Under this bill, the VA would also require staff to check that each doctor is prescribing drugs as registered with the DEA. Additionally, the VA would be charged with monitoring the performance of its doctors. Should the VA determine that a complaint against a doctor is substantiated, staff must notify a professional medical licensing board, the DEA, and the National Practitioner Data Bank. In its report, GAO found that the VA staff in charge of hiring weren't well versed in the resources for checking credentials of VA healthcare professionals. Therefore, this bill would also require biannual training to these employees on how to check credentials through sources like the National Practitioner Data Bank and state medical licensing boards. Last Congress, thankfully, this bill passed the House by a vote of 409 to 1. For context, that no vote was the member leader changed their on record their support to a yes. So this has broad support. In the last term, every member of Congress who's been here for more than 6 years voted in favor of this or supported it. It's my hope that we can pass this again and send it to the Senate and see it signed into law. My staff and I are eager to work with the committee on getting this bill to the House floor. Ultimately, America owes a tremendous debt to our veterans, and the Improving Confidence in Veterans Care Act would be an important step towards ensuring that they will receive the care owed to them. And we've been able to work together on this before. As I mentioned, every member on this committee has already voted in favor of this. So hopefully we can get this through the House again and send it to the Senate for action this time. Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it. I yield back.
I now call upon Representative Lizzie Fletcher of Texas, a good friend and great advocate for our veterans. Ms. Fletcher, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chairman Takano, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today before the committee about how we can support our country's veterans and the priorities for my district in Houston. More than 300,000 veterans call the Houston area home. According to the City of Houston's Office of Veterans Affairs, Houston has the second largest veteran population in the United States. I support the priorities that you have announced, Mr. Chairman, for the committee, and I come before you today to bring attention to one proposal in particular in the effort to modernize and meet the needs of our diverse veteran population. Ensuring that disabled veterans can live independent and mobile lives is of great importance. In my community and in communities across the country, independence and mobility are tied to transportation generally and to cars in particular. For disabled veterans, driving a car can present unique challenges. Fortunately, the VA has a successful grant program, the Automobile and Special Adaptive Equipment Grant Program, that makes it possible for service-disabled veterans to purchase cars and adapt them to meet their specific needs. This program, however, only allows for a one-time payment for one vehicle. If veterans need to replace their cars over time, as is usually the case, the program isn't available for subsequent purchases, and veterans pay for the modifications themselves, often many thousands of dollars. As you know, Chairman Takano, just last week, I introduced with you HR 3304, the Care Access Resources for Vets Act, or for short, CARS for Vets Act, to address this issue. This legislation builds on the success of the VA's current program. It allows program participants to purchase additional vehicles to meet their needs every 10 years. That way, even if the life cycle of a veteran's adapted car expires and needs to be replaced, veterans can continue to rely on the VA's grant program. This committee has estimated that nearly 60,000 veterans would benefit from the CARS for Vets Act in the next 10 years. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Bost, for the opportunity to testify and highlight this important program. I thank you for your consideration of this bill, and I hope that you will be able to move it through the committee and to the floor quickly. And I know that it will bring meaningful assistance to veterans here in my community and across the country who have served us all. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for all you do to support our veterans. And I'll yield back.
Thank you, Representative Fletcher, for your leadership on this issue. I look forward to working with you on it, and it's an important issue for automobiles for our disabled veterans. So thank you for your leadership. I now call upon a good friend, and truly is a good friend. I've actually visited his district in Arkansas and Little Rock. tremendous veterans caseworker staff that he has, and I appreciate the work we do together on issues related to East Asia on the Japan-U.S. Friendship Commission. I now call upon Representative French Hill.
Well, Chairman Takano, thank you so much. And my friend Mike Bost, Semper Fi to you, and so delighted you serve as the ranking member on our Veterans Affairs Committee. You guys are a dynamic team, and it's been very interesting to hear the priorities of our colleagues today as we all work across this country to benefit our veteran community. Also note today the passing of John Warner, a real, when I was a young man, I worked on the Senate staff. He was on the Armed Services Committee then, best friends with my boss, John Tower. Both were Navy men, and John, of course, was the Secretary of the Navy in the 70s. So America lost a great patriot today in the passing of Senator John Warner. So my heart goes out to his family and his many, many, many friends across Virginia and the U.S., but he loved the U.S. Navy. Although I don't have a specific piece of legislation before the committee at this time, I want to appreciate the chance to testify today and talk about some of the issues here in Arkansas that are front and center for veterans here. And again, let me thank you, Chairman Takano, for visiting the 2nd District in Arkansas and speaking about suicide prevention and other important issues here and sharing our time together. It means a lot when you visit one of our districts. I've had the opportunity to have an incredible team, as you noted, of veteran caseworkers on my staff on the 6 years that I've served in Congress. I couldn't do this work without them. Currently, I have 2 veteran staffers that I was able to initially hire through the Wounded Warrior Foundation. They're now permanently on my staff, and I was notified last week that I have the opportunity to have an additional Wounded Warrior join us later in the year. Their ability to connect with some 50,000 veterans here in Central Arkansas is incredible, and their dedication to helping slog through the bureaucratic red tape at the VA is impressive, because they've got the benefits that our veterans have earned by serving our country, and I'm proud of their continued service out of uniform on my team. My vet team has gotten back more than $27 million in earned benefits for Arkansas's veterans during my past 6 years in Congress, as well as helping families get numerous awards and assistance in burials along the way. Anything this committee can do to empower our veteran caseworkers and make that job of working with the VA easier will serve veterans around the country. One issue my office is currently having challenges with is, of course, the time it takes to get veteran records from the National Personnel Record Center based in St. Louis. The inability of the NPRC to get veteran records on a timely basis and confirm their service then in turn delays our work in delivering those benefits to veterans across the country. My office currently has about 150 pending requests for records, with the oldest dating from November 2019. I had a productive phone call with our friend, the nation's archivist, Dave Ferriero, about this very issue. And while I understand that COVID-19 pandemic has had a major role and delay in a lot of federal responsibilities, this backlog of records is a challenge, and the committee must ensure that this backlog is being addressed and that record requests are going out in a timely manner. Finally, I'd like to brief the committee on my office's Women's Veterans Initiative. This initiative was started by my staffer, Delane Tisserone, who's an Air Force veteran. Since our initial meeting in December of 2020, we've been able to engage the community of female veterans here in Central Arkansas. More women are serving in the United States Armed Forces than at any time in American history. Over time, numerous steps have been taken to establish a more inclusive environment for women currently serving in the military, as well as those who have separated. Information, resources which focus on these specific needs in the military have been initiated. But in some cases, these resources have remained unaltered and are based in the initial movement of more women into the military. I think the disbursement of that information and resources specifically for women is lacking. It's only from female veterans themselves that we can learn and ensure that the VA is also adequately equipped to take care of our women that have bravely served our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Bost, for the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I thank you for your attention and all the help you provide in leadership for our veterans across this great country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Representative Hill, I thank you for your leadership, and I want you to know that your concerns about the NPRC are bipartisan. There's been a bipartisan letter sent out by Ranking Member Bost and myself. And I understand the Ranking Member is going to be visiting the center. You appreciate his leadership on that issue as well. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get our own Women's Veterans Task Force renewed at some point. We're in discussions for that. And I thank you for the work you're doing. And I too am a beneficiary of the Wounded Warrior Foundation's fellowship program. Have hired some excellent staff, and it's impressive the amount of owed benefits you were able to obtain through your office. That's an impressive number. Ranking Member, I see you have unmuted. Do you want to have something?
Yeah,
to say?
if I can, I just want to say to Representative Hill, French, so you know that the records issue is a very large issue for us, all of us. I will be going over to St. Louis, matter of fact, later on today, and having a long meeting with them and trying to move them forward to, even though COVID has been the slowing problem that they've had, we need to, now that the vaccines are available, get everybody vaccinated back to work so we can start dealing with them right away.
Well, I appreciate that. And with your leadership and the appropriations bill at the end of the year, obviously, Congress on a bipartisan basis gave them some additional resources. But I know this plagues all of our offices and that really we want to serve our veterans. So thanks for your personal attention to it. And again, thank you, gentlemen, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Hill. This concludes our first panel. I want to thank all members for their appearance, and we look forward to working with you in the future. I now want to start calling up the second panel, beginning with a very good friend and chair of our select committee on the improvement of Congress. I may not have the title right, but it's Representative Kilmer of the state of Washington. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Ranking Member Bost for holding this member day. I represent Washington State's 6th Congressional District. I have the honor and privilege of representing perhaps more military veterans than any Democrat in Congress. And when it comes to serving our veterans, I think the federal government should follow a few basic truths. If you served our country, the government ought to have your back, and you shouldn't have to fight for the benefits that you've earned and deserve. There's a bunch of work to do to make sure the government keeps its promise to veterans, and I'm grateful for your work in that regard, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my concerns and concerns from the brave veterans that I represent. One of the core tenets of taking care of our veterans is ensuring that they have access to quality, affordable health care in a timely manner. Since the rollout of the VA Mission Act, veterans face significant challenges in accessing medical care in Region 4, which covers the Puget Sound area. I'm hoping this committee can help to help us resolve some of these issues and improve access to care provided by the VA. VA healthcare is provided to over 81,000 veterans in my region through the Puget Sound healthcare system of VA facilities and through a community care network of community providers. In our region, the CCN is administered through Tri-West. As you're aware, Congress passed the VA Mission Act in 2018 to provide veterans timely access to quality care and to make the community care network work better for veterans. The act included a variety of improvements to VA operations and IT systems. Now, unfortunately, since the VA Mission Act was implemented in June of 19, I've received numerous complaints from constituents voicing their frustrations with the rollout. We've heard from veterans and providers who report difficulties in accessing care for several reasons, including a lack of clear communication, long wait times to receive care, delays in approving claims, and an understaffed patient advocate program. I'm concerned that the VA and Tri-West did not clearly communicate process changes. Many veterans were not informed of the new procedures to request continuing care through their existing community providers, leaving them without access to quality care. Moving forward, the VA needs to improve communications with veterans to ensure that they can make informed decisions about their care. I'm also alarmed by a lack of communication to providers. I've received feedback that Tri-West didn't notify providers if they were selected to remain in the network. Many providers indicate they did not receive instructions on how to complete the recredentialing process. The VA and Tri-West need to improve communications to community providers to ensure that they understand process changes and recredentialing procedures. On top of that, veterans are experiencing long wait times for appointments at VA facilities and in the community. Phone calls too often go unanswered, appointments too often are delayed, and wait time standards are not being met. That's unacceptable. If the VA is unable to provide an appointment at a VA facility within wait time standards, 20 days for primary care, 28 days for specialty care, then the veteran is eligible to receive care through the CCN. An alarming 2020 GAO report highlights a potential 19-day wait period while the appointment request proceeds through the VA's referral and scheduling process. After the referral is forwarded to a CCN provider, there is no standard wait time for the appointment to be scheduled. Internal VA data from October of 2019 through 2020, June of 2020, showed veterans waiting an average of 41.9 days for an appointment in the community. The VA needs to establish an achievable wait time goal for CCN appointments. I'm also troubled with delays providers are experiencing in having claims adjudicated. The VA Mission Act included provisions to modernize the legacy IT systems and manual processes. I've received feedback that the software tool used for claim adjudication is not fully functional, yet legacy faxes go unanswered. I urge the VA to exercise oversight of software tools to ensure the software is functional for seamless claims adjudication. Finally, and we could use your help with this, I'm disturbed by the understaffed patient advocate office in our region. The office plays an important role in assisting veterans struggling to navigate the system. Currently, the Puget Sound website lists only 3 patient advocates assigned to cover the over 112,000 veterans accessing healthcare in our region. I urge the VA to hire additional patient advocates for Region 4. We have raised these issues on quarterly calls with the VA Puget Sound, but ultimately these issues aren't just impacting veterans in my district, but veterans across the country. With that in mind, I ask that the committee works with me on these issues so that our veterans can access the care they've earned. Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I am proud to stick up for our veterans, men and women who have always responded with courage and loyalty in service to our country. And I'm grateful for their tremendous dedication and sacrifice. And I'm grateful for your partnership and leadership. And with that, I yield back.
Representative Kilmer, I want to thank you for that crystallization of an issue that's plaguing VA nationally. We have had hearings on this particular issue. We are going to have to step up the oversight. We thought we had passed legislation that addressed the many issues that you raised, but it's important, and I welcome feedback from members about access to community care, the timeliness of their ability to schedule appointments. This is very disturbing to me to hear this. And I have to acknowledge that this is not just a problem in your district, but I've just talked to my staff as you were talking to us. We need to step up the oversight and get VA to really change and reform its scheduling process. So thank you so much for your testimony today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. I now call upon Representative Keller from Pennsylvania. I understand you're joining us from a car, which I have to say I've done before too. So Representative Keller, are you there and with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman. And as is the case with anybody these days, we're making sure we're staying connected. And of course, our military has done a lot of things from mobile applications. So I thank the Chairman. I appreciate the committee holding this bipartisan member day hearing to discuss important issues affecting our nation's veterans. I've heard this from other members, and it's certainly an issue here in PA 12 that we hear from constituents regularly about frustrations related to the National Personal Records Center, or the NPRC, and the growing backlog of unprocessed requests for documentation from veterans and military families. The NPRC houses 2 million cubic feet of military personnel and records, medical records, that are currently only available in paper form. Since in-person staffing is so important for the NPRC to process requests, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a serious challenge. The National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA, which oversees the NPRC, estimates that there's currently a backlog of 500,000 unprocessed requests, including several requests from people I represent dating back as far as February of last year. That means our veterans have been waiting as long as 15 months for copies of service records in order to access their VA benefits, information needed to adjudicate disability claims, or other documentation needed to request a commendation, award, or regalia such as a Purple Heart or Campaign Service Medal. Any delay for any one of these requests is simply unacceptable. Our veterans earned these benefits, and it is unconscionable that the federal government would make them wait to receive them. Along with several bipartisan colleagues, I have contacted the NPRC, White House, and NARA to express concern, gather information, and offer suggestions and congressional assistance. Yet the NPRC continues to be open at only 25% capacity to process returns, which must be done in person. The first step to effectively tackling this backlog of requests is to reopen the NPRC and get employees back to work safely. It is time for Americans to get back to work and for businesses to safely reopen using vaccines, masks, social distancing, PPE, and other tools to minimize the spread of COVID-19. If America's businesses can make it work, so can the federal government. Next, the NPRC needs to work with the VA to establish and roll out the best practices for eliminating backlogs and improving turnaround time for these requests. Right now, the NARA is reporting that it will take another 18 to 24 months to fully address the backlog. This timeline is unacceptable, and a new strategy is sorely needed. I'm committed to engaging with the NPRC to move toward a solution that will allow them to promptly address the problem efficiently. Going forward, Congress, the NARA, NPRC, and the VA should work together on a contingency plan so that this problem never arises again. This includes thinking through how requests can be promptly and effectively addressed, regardless of the staffing complement. I look forward to working with all relevant entities and my colleagues in Congress to resolve this critical issue as quickly as possible so our veterans can get the level of responsiveness that they've earned and deserve. Again, Chairman, thank you for having this, and I yield back.
Representative, I appreciate your testimony, and I agree with you. We do need to get the NPRC up and running. And I certainly appreciate your acknowledgement that masks and use of vaccines are part of the solution. And we here in the Congress have to also make sure that everyone gets vaccinated as well so that we can open up. So I'm now going to turn this hearing over to Mr. Mervan, who will preside for the remainder of the hearing. And so I wish I could be around to introduce a great colleague and veteran, Mikey Sherrill, but he's going to have to do that. So Mr. Mervan, I turn the hearing over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, I'd like to recognize Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Takano. Thank you, Acting Chair Mervan, Ranking Member Bost, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today about burn pits. I also want to thank my good friends Raul Ruiz, Elaine Luria, and Alyssa Slotkin for their hard work and leadership on this topic. I'm here with you today to talk about an issue that we're all familiar with and yet continues to plague our men and women in uniform during their service and long after they've returned to civilian life: toxic exposure. This issue is one that Congress has been wrestling with for decades, from Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam to the toxic burn pits today. And we all know how long it took Congress to get veterans with Agent Orange exposure the help and support they deserve. Well, burn pits has rightly been called our generation's Agent Orange. And I know all of you share my determination to avoid repeating our past mistakes. We've all heard from our VSOs and our veterans communities about the long-term health implications of exposure to burn pits and about the hurdles that so many of our veterans have faced in receiving benefits from the VA. Some members in this body have personally been exposed, and many of us have friends or loved ones who are suffering from chronic problems because of exposure. The sheer volume of health problems associated with toxic exposure is staggering. Exposure-related illnesses run the gamut from asthma to cancer, and those are just the ones we know about. And they can be particularly insidious, often not showing up until years after a veteran has left military service or until it's too late to effectively treat. I've heard from veterans who have spent years trying to get a handle on the effects of their exposure, fighting through delays, denial of benefits, and ineffective treatment from their physicians. At each step, there have been hurdles and roadblocks. This is how we're treating the men and women who put their lives on the line through the last few decades. And despite our knowledge about the impacts, there are still burn pits actively in use today. What more is it going to take? I know that you will agree with me when I say after signing up to risk their lives and serve their country, the last thing a veteran deserves is to come home with a potentially life-threatening illness associated with their service, and then have to fight a battle at home for years to receive the treatment, the recognition of their illness's service connection, and the care they need. I've worked closely with many of you on this committee on this issue. I want to thank Rep. Ruiz and Rep. Luria for your leadership. Together, Rep. Ruiz and I brought John Stewart to speak to the Four Country Caucus, a bipartisan group of veterans in Congress who work across the aisle to address issues impacting veterans and our national security. We need every advocate we can muster to help us solve this problem. We know it's not a partisan issue. Each member of this body wants the best for our veterans, who give their best for us. So as this committee considers the route to achieve care and coverage for veterans with toxic exposure, I urge you to consider a broad presumption of service connection, a wide range of eligible service areas, an in-depth list of potentially related illnesses, and robust coverage for those with exposure. That's the least we can do. I thank you again, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Cheryl. At this time, we'd like to recognize Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. I believe Chairman Takano left, but I want to thank him, Representative Mervan, Ranking Member Bost. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. As you all know, by virtue of the fact of your service on the committee that you see every day, veterans are the backbone of our country. And day in and day out, we all know they sacrifice not just their physical health, but their psychological and emotional health as well. And right now, more than 3.5 million of our nation's veterans, as Mikey has just pointed out, have been exposed to burn pits that expel toxins and carcinogens into the air. However, they are not receiving the most adequate care from the VA when they return home. Mikey and I, as well as a lot of other of our bipartisan colleagues, are working on legislation, which I'm co-leading, HR 2372, the Bipartisan Presumptive Benefits for Warfighters Exposed to Burn Pits and Other Toxins Act, to get our sick and dying veterans the care that they not only need, but they have earned. We all came together to bring across the finish line the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund to take care of our first responders. We now need to take care of our veterans who were similarly exposed to these toxins. Even though we all know our veterans are heroes, the VA and the Department of Defense continue to deny them the necessary care. And this bipartisan legislation will establish a presumptive service connection for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxins. And it'll also streamline the process for obtaining vital VA benefits. No veterans should die waiting for care. And that's why I strongly believe that this legislation should be passed by this committee. And I respectfully ask that you consider it and mark it up. Another piece of legislation I'd like to bring to your attention is HR 2569. Mikey also referenced Agent Orange. This is new legislation, the Veterans Agent Orange Exposure Equity Act. The VA currently adds additional restrictions regarding where and what military occupation a veteran must have served while reviewing service-connected disability claims on a case-by-case basis. This process disqualifies too many veterans from receiving the benefits they deserve, even though the VA and the DoD recognize that Agent Orange was used, tested, and stored in locations outside of the Republic of Vietnam. This Agent Orange legislation would expand the presumption of exposure to this toxic herbicide for Vietnam War veterans who were deployed to certain areas of Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos. Furthermore, it would include veterans who served in the active military, naval, or air service while assigned to a duty station in close proximity to the Republic of Vietnam between January 9th of 1962 and May 7th of 1975. Moreover, Mr. Chairman, as co-chair of the Bipartisan Addiction and Mental Health Task Force, I also want to highlight the 2020 National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report that was conducted by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. This report found that the suicide rate for veterans ages 18 to 34 increased from 25.5 suicide deaths per 100,000 citizens in 2005 to 32 suicide deaths per 100,000 in 2017. Supporting programs that offer suicide prevention counseling to our veterans should be and must be our top priority. Veteran suicide prevention and outreach programs will make a huge difference in providing essential care for our struggling veterans. With that, I appreciate the consideration of these really important priorities. I do appreciate all of you serving on this committee, because by doing that and serving our veterans, you're also serving in a very special capacity in the U.S. Congress. So we appreciate you. We ask your consideration of these two toxic chemical inhalation type pieces of legislation, both pertaining to burn pits and exposure to Agent Orange. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman Fitzpatrick. At this time, I would like to recognize for 5 minutes Congressman Michael San Nicolas from the Territory of Guam.
I wanted to begin by thanking Chairman Takano, of course, Acting Chairman Mervan, and the Ranking Member Bost, members of this valued committee. I come before you today representing tens of thousands of veterans who have put their lives on the line serving their country over decades. These same veterans fight, and some sadly have died fighting, for this very government to extend decency that they so deserve for their service. I wanted to, of course, thank the chairman as well for bringing a Codel to Guam and to our islands, showcasing his commitment and the commitment of this committee to look out for the interests of all veterans, regardless of where they originate and regardless of where they reside in this country. Thank you very much to the chairman and the committee for that. To begin, I would like to highlight what was observed in that Codel, and that is the fact that our access to medical care for many of our veterans, particularly in our territories, and particularly in our Pacific territories, is a lot less robust than it is anywhere else in the country. Our proximity to care makes it difficult for our veterans to be able to access the same quality of care that many other members of the country can access. And if they're not able to access it in their immediate vicinity, they're able to go and access it in nearby vicinities. That is unfortunately not the case in Guam. What I ask is that the committee help us to find greater alignment between our Naval Hospital on Guam and our veterans systems of care on Guam, so we can have a system of care overall that's very similar to what's being provided in Tripler in Hawaii, that's serving both active duty and veterans in that particular area. On a policy level, I would like to focus the remainder of my testimony on a concern regarding Agent Orange. When this body enacted the Veterans Dioxin and Radiation Exposure Compensation Standards Act in 1984 and Agent Orange Act in 1991, we recognized the mounting scientific evidence that herbicides containing dioxin caused very serious and even debilitating health conditions. While the VA and Department of Defense continue to deny that Agent Orange was used by this government on the island of Guam, there exists substantial evidence indicating otherwise. Our armed forces on Guam, as well as the island itself, were used to support the operations of the Vietnam War, including logistics, artillery, manpower replenishment, and even refugee processing. A government accountability report released in November 2018 reported that at least one vessel carrying Agent Orange ported on Guam. Record keeping on behalf of the DoD was deficient, with many lost or destroyed. The records do not exist. The records that do exist do not indicate what cargo was unloaded or remained on board. Identification of Agent Orange testing and storage sites outside of Vietnam was deficient, and some of the commercial herbicides the VA conceded were used in Guam contained 2,4-D, 2,4,5-T, or both. As a refresher, the provisions of the Agent Orange Act of 1991 apply to all herbicides containing 2,4-D, or dioxin, used in support of combat operations in Vietnam, and is therefore inclusive of those used on Guam. Using the VA's legal standard, the Veterans Legal Services Clinic of the Jerome N. Frank Legal Services Organization examined widely available evidence and determined that it is as likely as it is not that service members who served on Guam were exposed to toxic herbicides containing dioxin. I ask that the study be entered into the record without objections. Over the course of 3 decades, cell testing by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Guam Environmental Protection Agency have revealed herbicide and dioxin pollution in locations throughout the island, where veterans have been telling us toxic chemicals were sprayed. Very recent soil samples tested in 2018 and repeated in 2019 detected 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, as well as the toxic TCDD byproduct. The soil samples indicate, the GAA reports indicate, that there has been and there is dioxin use on Guam and present and affecting the veterans who served during that time. Mr. Chairman, my good friend from Florida, Representative Gus Bilirakis, has joined me in introduce H.R. 3368, which will expand the presumption of service connections for veterans who were exposed to herbicides on the island of Guam. The evidence is there, and we need to make sure that our veterans who were exposed to this, regardless of the fact that it was exposed outside of a combat zone, it still was an exposure, and those exposures are causing health situations for these veterans that should be addressed with the laws and provisions that we've made available for them. I ask this committee to make right by our veterans and make H.R. 3368 a priority. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank you very much, Congressman Michael Sands Nicholas. I appreciate that. And next we have Congressman Andy Briggs from Arizona.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Mervan and Ranking Member Bost, and I thank Chairman Takano as well. I recently introduced the Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act and request that the committee support and advance the bill. 7 years ago, it was discovered that more than 40 veterans had died while waiting for health care from the Carl T. Hayden Veterans Administration Medical Center in Phoenix. Unfortunately, this problem was not just in Phoenix, and veterans from around the nation began revealing the horrendous conditions and wait times they faced at their local VAs. Our veterans were forced into a healthcare system that did not meet their physical or mental health needs. Upon hearing this, Congress acted, and in 2018, President Trump signed the Bipartisan Va Mission Act into law. That legislation was designed to expand access and improve the quality of care for veterans. While we've seen marked improvements, there are still significant problems. According to one newspaper account, in Georgia, between September 2020 and early May of 2021, more than 12,000 veterans had to wait more than 30 days for a response from the Atlanta VA healthcare system. And that does not include 6,000 that were already waiting prior to September. One veteran in Georgia had to wait 3 months to get a pair of eyeglasses that he broke during the pandemic. He had to drive 170 miles both ways, total round trip, and after being examined by a doctor, still had to wait for 3 months to get his glasses in the mail. In Phoenix, a veteran who had been seeking help from the local VA ended up taking his life. Earlier this year, the entire Massachusetts congressional delegation wrote to VA Secretary McDonough to protest, quote, reports of veterans being asked to travel to Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island for appointments, including a veteran with multiple sclerosis who had to drive 220 miles round trip in a blizzard to an appointment in Connecticut, close quote. These are just a few examples of the challenges our veterans continue to face. In 2014, Congress passed the Veterans Access, Choice, and Accountability Act. This legislation created the Commission on Care to examine veterans' access to health care and to make recommendations on how to improve the VA. In 2016, this commission presented its report to the Obama-Biden administration and made several recommendations, including allowing veterans to have greater access to community care. The Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act, the legislation I have introduced, would create a 3-year pilot program that would improve veterans' ability to access healthcare in the free market. Currently, veterans must receive approval from the Department of Veteran Affairs before they can receive community care. My legislation would simplify that so that veterans only needed to receive approval from their primary care physician. Veterans would be able to access primary, specialty, and mental health care outside of their corresponding veteran integrated service network and at non-VA facilities. Veterans would be free to choose any primary care doctor in the covered care system or have a specialist designated as their primary care doctor. Veterans needing mental health services would be able to choose their own mental health care provider. By eliminating bureaucratic red tape and allowing veterans to go straight to their doctor for care, we can ensure that no veteran dies waiting for care. This legislation is the best way to ensure that veterans are able to gain access to quality health care in a timely manner. Our brave men and women of the armed forces have answered our nation's call and put their lives on the line to defend us from those who seek to take our freedoms. From Normandy to Vietnam to the Middle East, they have exemplified the best of America. They have fought for us, and now it's time for us to fight for them and ensure that they have access to the care they need, they want, and they deserve. Thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes to testify today. I hope this committee will begin consideration of the Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act. Thank you so much, and I yield my time.
Congressman Biggs, we thank you very much for your time and your testimony. At this time, I'd like to recognize Congressman Brad Wenstrup from the great state of Ohio.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, for holding this Member Day hearing, giving us the opportunity to testify on important issues facing our veterans today. As a former member of this committee, it's great to be back with all of you. And while I may have left the committee, I haven't stopped working for our nation's veterans. I know that one of the committee's top priorities this year is dealing with toxic exposures. We've been hearing that today, including open burn pits that may have harmed our warfighters during their service and contributed to lingering health effects. Having served in Iraq, I understand that in addition to the immediate dangers of war, there are costs of service that may not become clear until years later. And that's a concern with burn pits and their potential to cause disease years after exposure. The effects of burn pits, which were once a daily ritual in combat zones, have become a serious health concern, obviously, to the servicemen and women who are exposed to them during their deployments. So as both a service member and as a physician, I'm committed to promoting efforts to determine the health impacts of burn pits and what can be done to assist those that have been exposed. As co-chair of the Congressional Burn Pits Caucus with my friend Dr. Ruiz, I appreciate the work being done in the Veterans Affairs Committee to address the issue of burn pits and other toxic exposures to ensure that our service members get the answers they deserve and as much, obviously, the care that they need. So I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of Ranking Member Bost Toxic Exposure in the American Military Act, or TEAM Act. This is a serious proposal that will establish a new framework for dealing with toxic exposure issues, a framework I hope and believe will be much more successful than the long and difficult process that we learn lessons from responding to Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. I'm also interested in working to improve and expand the VA's Airborne Hazards and Open Burn Pit Registry. That's a key component to this, the registry, and I'm proud to lead the Burn Pits Registry Enhancement Act with Dr. Ruiz, which would direct the VA Secretary to ensure that upon the death of an individual that's on the burn pit registry, an immediate family member of the deceased individual or executor of the deceased person's estate can update the registry with the deceased individual's cause of death. It's important for those that come after us and for those that are in this registry and for those working on this to have all the information that we need. As the burn pits registry is expanded and Congress exercises oversight on burn pit related issues, this bill would help to improve accuracy in identifying causes of death of the individuals registered on the burn pit registry. So this will help us get better data on the health outcomes of veterans exposed to burn pits. We can learn something from treatments they may be getting, and it will in turn make the registry a more useful tool to examine the effects of burn pit exposure and better inform our policies and treatments going forward. So as the committee continues its work this year to prepare legislation addressing these exposures, I hope that you'll consider the legislation that I've discussed today as a key part of that effort. And I want to thank everyone once again for holding this hearing, giving me the opportunity to speak on these issues. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Wenstrup. At this time, I'd like to I will now hand over the chair to Congresswoman Julia Brownley.
Thank you, Representative Moran. And our next member is Congressman Carter from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to also thank Ranking Member Bost for his work on this. And I want to thank the committee for its work on the VA Mission Telehealth Clarification Act that passed last Congress. With this passage as part of the NDAA, trainees working at VA at the Veteran Affairs Centers can now participate in important telehealth programs serving our veterans. It's critically important that our veterans are able to access care no matter where they are. And I'm pleased that this remains a priority for the committee. That said, the VA's community care program continues to be an issue for the veterans in Georgia's 1st Congressional District that I have the honor and privilege of representing. Our district does not have a VA medical center, which means in order to receive any emergency care or specialty procedures, they need to travel, sometimes great distances. Like many other districts, we only have outpatient clinics and lean on the ability for veterans to receive care in the community. However, the #1 complaint I receive is that a veteran is unable to see a provider locally and must travel hours away to a VA medical center. I urge the committee to continue improving the community care program to be convenient and effective for our veterans and our providers. Next, I would like to highlight the need for improved mental health services for veterans. Our men and women in uniform have some of the most rigorous and difficult jobs that exist. They deploy to every corner of the globe and brave combat in order to protect our freedoms. Just as we care for the physical wounds for him who shall have borne the battle, we must care for the mental health of our veterans. Mental health issues among veterans can disproportionately lead to drug abuse, homelessness, and suicide. One veteran suicide or one homeless veteran is one too many. And we must end this tragic statistic that as many as 20 veterans die by suicide every day. Further, the isolation and anxiety of COVID-19 has added even more stress for our veterans, exacerbating an already significant mental health challenge. In fact, VA facilities around the country have reported dramatic increases in virtual mental health services during the pandemic. The committee must ensure that the VA is equipped to address the increased demand for mental health services. Lastly, although the National Personnel Record Center does not fall under the Department of Veteran Affairs, I would like to emphasize the need to clear the backlog of record requests. While the Nprc has returned to a pre-pandemic level of operations, there remains a significant backlog of approximately 500,000 requests. These records are necessary to complete veterans' claims for compensation care and other benefits. Without them, a veteran is stuck waiting for the Nprc to clear its backlog before he or she can complete their claim. Please do everything within the committee's power to ensure our veterans are not deprived of their essential care. Thank you again for providing this opportunity to share the priorities and concerns of the veterans in my district. I look forward to working with the committee to provide the best care and benefits possible to our veterans. Thank you again, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Bost, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Carter. All important issues. Thanks for bringing them to our attention. And next is Congressman Davidson.
Thanks. I really appreciate the recognition. I appreciate the chairman and ranking member for providing this member day. And look, as a former Army Ranger, as a member of the West Point Board of Visitors, as someone who's worn our nation's uniform and had the chance to serve in Congress, it is an honor to serve alongside so many of you and so many of our other colleagues who truly put the needs of our veterans at the top of the priority list. I really can't think of a more bipartisan thing that goes on in Congress right now than making sure that our nation keeps its promises that it's made to our veterans. And so, that's why I was pleased to put together a letter in April after visiting the National Personnel Record Center to see what's going on with the backlog. I appreciate other members who've already highlighted the problem there, but fundamentally, that record center is a 6 million square foot warehouse in St. Louis. It's stacked about 4 stories high with banker boxes of records. It's not been operated as a critical facility. It's not been operated as an essential facility. When it wasn't closed, it's been operated at 25% capacity. In late fall, it went to 2 shifts at 25% capacity. And in a response to me, they said that they could not run 24/7 continuous operations. I would like to highlight that thankfully, our groceries Grocery businesses have delivered food by manning their warehouses 24/7. Amazon clearly knows how to operate their warehouses. And frankly, even Chewy, the dog toy company, has made sure our nation's pets have had chew toys by operating warehouses. It's embarrassing that the National Personnel Record Center cannot operate a warehouse to serve our veterans and deliver the records that they need to get the benefits that the American people have promised them. It is incumbent upon us to do our duty, not just in this committee, but as members of Congress. All of us should be united. No administration, regardless of political affiliation, should be divided in any way on delivering these promises. And right now, after giving this record center $15 million at the end of the year, the best answer that they can give us is that 18 to 24 months from getting to full strength, which they have no plan to get to in spite of being vaccinated, 18 to 24 months from getting to full strength, they can clear the backlog. That is completely unacceptable. We should be deploying National Guard or any other resources. In fact, I'd be willing to sell it to Amazon. Somebody has to operate this warehouse that cares about delivering on our promises that we've made to our veterans. And I just plead with everyone on this committee, every one of our colleagues, use your personal relationships, use your credit, press, whatever it takes. I've visited the place. We have to keep the promises we've made to our veterans. We can do it with legislation. We ought to be able to do it with a phone call to the president's chief of staff. This is solvable. And I don't think any of us should care who gets the credit. It just needs solved. The last thing I want to highlight is a bill that I introduced. In fact, when I campaigned for office, I said that it would be the first bill that I introduced. And it was, and it's disappointing that it hasn't built more support. But the good news is that since I've been in Congress, things like the Mission Act and the VA Accountability Act have improved the level of service for our veterans. But at the time, one of the things that united our country is making sure that the backlog was cleared, and it's moved too slowly. But I thought, what better way to show our veterans that we will prioritize them getting the medical care that they've been promised and are owed by telling them that members of Congress will lead by example. So the bill is called the Lead by Example Act. It's HR 3030. And it simply says that no member of Congress shall have a health insurance benefit other than the VA health benefit. So we currently participate in the Obamacare exchange. It's got mixed results. And I think if we could participate in the VA care system as members of Congress, we'd see the care that our veterans are getting. We would prioritize the flexibility of choice. We might move to TRICARE. We would help clear the backlog. And I'd love to have more co-sponsors on the Lead by Example Act. I appreciate the work this committee does. Thank you for taking the promises we make to our veterans so seriously, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Congressman Davidson, and I certainly share your concern on the NPRC issue, and I know the committee is working hard on this, as many members are, and we just have to keep persisting. So thank you very much. Congressman Bilirakis from Florida, you're recognized.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. And Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for holding this bipartisan Member Day hearing. It's an honor to speak before the committee this morning. For most of my career, as you know, actually, for 14 years, I served on this great committee, and look forward to one day being able to serve on it again. I've said out again, I just want you to know that I appreciate everything you're doing in a bipartisan fashion. I often found myself in awe of the sacrifices, obviously, of our heroes and efforts that have been made on behalf of our great country. So we appreciate the men and women who have worn the uniform of our armed services. And I want to commend Congressman Davidson for his remarks as well. I want to associate myself with his remarks. Our veterans deserve the care, and veterans are still my top priority. I will continue to stand alongside the great work you're doing. One of my long-standing commitments towards our nation's veterans has been to rectify the unfair offset between the military retired pay and the VA disability compensation, known as concurrent receipt. Congress has implemented concurrent receipt payments for some veterans since 2004, a policy championed by my father, Congressman Michael Bilirakis, for many, many years. But has yet to provide, Congress has yet to provide it equally for every disabled veteran, primarily due to costs. Despite spending trillions of dollars on yearly budgets, we never manage, unfortunately, to have the funding necessary to make these veterans whole, and I'll continue to work on this. I have two pieces of legislation that address the concurrent receipt problem. HR 303, many of you are co-sponsors, the Retired Pay Restoration Act, and HR 1282, the Major Star Act. I especially want to thank my friend and colleague, Dr. Ruiz, and he serves on the committee now, for his support in co-leading the Major Richard Starr Act, which focuses on concurrent receipt for Chapter 61 combat veterans. I urge the rest of the members of this committee to support this particular effort, and if you will, we urge you to co-sponsor this bill. Another top priority of mine is providing access to care and benefits for veterans who have been exposed to toxic burn pits. I've been glad to have introduced and supported multiple bills in this space in past Congresses, and we don't care who gets the credit. We just got to get this done. And this year, I'm proud to be an original co-lead on HR 2127, the TEAM Act, which comprehensively addresses toxic exposure now and in the future. I want to thank Ranking Member Bost for his commitment to the TEAM Act, and I urge the chairman, the chairwoman as well, to reach an agreement with the House and the Senate on this issue. Our veterans cannot afford to wait any longer for the medical treatment and benefits they deserve. I've also had significant feedback from my district's veteran constituents expressing their desire to add dental care to the VA's medical benefits package. Studies have shown that regular preventive dental care equates to lower healthcare costs and better outcomes. For these reasons, I will soon file the Vet Care Act, which would expand on this research to determine the potential health benefits to veterans with diabetes and the potential cost savings to the VA associated with the periodontal care, all through a 4-year pilot program. I was grateful that the committee, through the help of the chairwoman, unanimously reported the Vet Care Act out of the full committee markup last Congress, and I hope the chair will commit to doing so again. Lastly, I had the distinct pleasure in the past Congress to serve as ranking member of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, and I'm proud of the work we are doing, and I'm working with my friend, again, Mike Levin. He did a great job as chairman. This Congress, I remain committed to improving the livelihoods of our nation's veterans and will be filing legislation to provide full parity of basic allowance for housing, monthly stipends for post 9/11 GI Bill veterans who are taking classes solely online. Now more than ever, we need it. The irony is not lost again on me as we sit here in this virtual online hearing and have done so throughout the COVID pandemic. I'll be finishing up, Madam Chair. Most students have also had to do this, and yet those veterans who had embraced online only classes prior to the pandemic were only able to access 50% of their housing stipend. I want to rectify this. So anyway, without further ado, I don't want to run over too long. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Bilirakis, and we miss you on the committee, but thank you for your continued advocacy for our nation's veterans. So I now recognize Congressman Meyer. Please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Mr. Ranking Member for calling this hearing today and giving the opportunity to discuss the efforts that are ongoing on behalf of our nation's veterans. This is clearly an area where strong bipartisan support and cooperation remains, and I'm grateful for the chance to speak. We have an urgent moral obligation, as many other members have noted, to take care of the men and women who have served and sacrificed to defend our nation. As an Iraq War veteran myself, I'll always advocate for those brave service members and consider it an honor to have the opportunity opportunity to do so as a member of Congress. I'm proud to have already joined several of my colleagues in these bipartisan efforts. And one of the top priorities we've been addressing so far is the toxic exposure issue that our veterans have experienced from burn pits during their service, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also in other post 9/11 environments with a variety of toxic exposure risks. I'm proud to have introduced HR 2436, the Veteran Burn Pits Exposure Recognition Act, alongside my Michigan colleague, Representative Slotkin, as a critical first step to move this conversation forward and complement other legislative efforts. And I actually know that there's a concurrent opportunity and hearing going on right now on that issue, so I'm very optimistic. Our bill formally concedes that exposure to airborne hazards and toxic substances from burn pits for veterans who served in these locations during covered periods, that takes the unreasonable burden off of the veteran to first prove specific exposures when filing a claim with the VA. I commend Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, and the entire committee for your clear dedication to addressing this issue, and I appreciate the conversations you have had on this bill, among others. I'm committed to this effort and stand ready to assist the committee in any way that I can to move this forward. But I also want to use my time today to bring attention to the persistent staffing challenges that have plagued the Veterans Health Administration, VHA, for years. We all want to make sure that veterans are receiving the high quality care they deserve, and this requires having enough medical providers to administer that care. Unfortunately, severe VHA staffing shortages have continued for years and represent a consistent obstacle to adequate treatment and care for our veterans. I'm proud to be co-leading an effort to address this long-standing challenge alongside my friend from Colorado, Mr. Crow, and would like to thank him for his continued leadership on this issue. Together, we introduced HR 3027, the Veterans Improved Access to Care Act of 2021, to establish a VA pilot program aimed at expediting the onboarding of licensed medical professionals at understaffed VA facilities. This bill would also expand related reporting requirements in the Va Mission Act, as others have mentioned, and require the Secretary of the VA to submit a detailed report on how to best streamline the VA's hiring process. According to a September 2020 report from the VA Office of the Inspector General, 95% of VHA facilities identified having at least one severe occupational staffing shortage. This report also found that 87% of medical center directors identified a severe shortage of medical officers and 72% a severe shortage of nurses. It's an unacceptable and unsustainable situation for our veterans, and we must do better, starting with our efforts. I appreciate the significant opportunities and efforts made by the department to expedite the hiring and onboarding process, specifically to meet the needs and challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. But these were emergency steps taken to address a public health crisis, and we need to shift to a careful analysis of what worked well, what can be improved upon, and what other strategies may exist to continue to expedite the hiring process beyond just the COVID-19 impacts, while ensuring the continuation of quality care. That's the exact opportunity that our pilot program aims to provide. The existing information gap amplifies the need for such a pilot program as we would establish in our bill. Our legislation sets the conditions of the program, requires the participation of at least 10 facilities in regionally diverse areas with varied populations. And it also mandates that at least 3 of those facilities are chosen from areas with populations of fewer than 100,000 people, ensuring that facilities serving smaller and more rural communities are also included. By choosing facilities from all over the country, representing different communities with varied demographics, will help provide the VA with strategies to benefit all veterans regardless of the areas where they live, from cities to suburbs to rural areas. The lessons learned by this program will be critical in determining the most efficient strategies to address long-term staffing shortages, getting more qualified VA medical personnel into these facilities, and doing so without sacrificing the quality of care. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you on efforts to assist the brave men and women who answered the call to serve our country in uniform. And I thank you again for this opportunity to speak to the committee today. And I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Meyer, and thank you for your service in Iraq and your continued service to our nation's veterans. And I now recognize Congresswoman Angie Craig from Minnesota.
Thank you so much, Representative Brownlee, and thank you to the chairman, Mr. Takano, the ranking member, and members of the committee for allowing me to testify in front of you today. I'm honored to represent Minnesota's 2nd District, which includes both southern borders, the southern suburbs of the Twin Cities, and rural greater Minnesota. My district is home to more than 33,000 veterans. Today, I'd like to speak on a priority I know that we all share: the importance of access to mental health services for our nation's veterans and National Guard members. I'm particularly concerned about those rural areas and former service members who do not qualify to receive care at the VA. Tragically, despite years of attention and effort, Minnesota continues to lose around 100 veterans annually to completed suicide. We know that suicide is often preventable, yet its causes are complex and treatment too often remains inaccessible. Last month, I hosted a roundtable with local stakeholders to address this very issue. The participants represented a mix of state-based agencies, nonprofits, VSOs, and the Minnesota National Guard. These dedicated professionals, many of whom are veterans themselves, discussed the complex challenges facing those who return from service. An array of challenges combating stigma, the need for common entry points to care, and ensuring a seamless transition between VA and community care providers lie before us. In 2020, Minnesota was selected to participate in the Governor's Challenge, a joint initiative between SAMHSA and the VA to prevent suicide among service members, veterans, and their families. Governor Tim Walz, a retired Guardsman and former ranking member of this committee, directed Minnesota's Department of Veterans Affairs to work with the state's VA health care systems, NAMI Minnesota, vet centers, and the Minnesota Department of Health and other stakeholders to develop a comprehensive and collaborative plan for reducing deaths by suicide to zero. The plan focuses on 4 priority areas: identify and screening service members and their families who are at risk, forming a culturally competent approach to suicide risk screening, improving the transition process and lethal means safety and safety planning. The goals of the Governor's Challenge are directly supported by the committee's major suicide prevention bills that passed into law last year. Thanks to this committee's bipartisan work, the Veterans Compact Act and the Commander John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Care Improvement Act will help address the gaps in care and intervention experienced by many constituents and veterans across this nation. I respectfully request that this committee exercise oversight over the provisions that address VA staffing and rural veterans' access to mental health care, as well as the newly established grant program to improve VA collaboration with community organizations already serving our nation's veterans. Additionally, I would welcome the opportunity to help in this oversight and bring my perspective as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, with oversight of SAMHSA and HHS to the table. I know this committee is aware of these issues and has worked tirelessly to address them. As Chairman Takano has said, we cannot tolerate any number of veteran suicides. I'm committed to partnering with you in these efforts and to ensure our veterans receive the care that they both need and deserve. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you for your advocacy around this very important issue that we have to continue to pursue. So thank you for that. And last but not least, our Congressman Kahale from Hawaii.
Aloha, Chair Brownlee, and aloha from Hawaii. Mahalo, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Bost, and members of the committee. Mahalo for the opportunity to discuss veteran issues in Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District and the Pacific region. Veterans make up approximately 10% of Hawaii's population, according to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District is home to about 56,000 veterans. Our state also has a large number of women and minority veterans, about 11,400 female veterans, and about 73,000 minority veterans. So on behalf of Hawaii's large and diverse veteran constituency, I would like to advocate for 3 things. 1, the VA telehealth partnership programs. 2, minority and gender-specific healthcare for veterans, and finally 3, honoring the late Senator Daniel Kahikina Akaka by renaming the Aloha VA Clinic as the Daniel K. Akaka Department of Veterans Affairs Outpatient Center. Hawaii's veteran population is spread out throughout the 8 Hawaiian Islands. Veterans who live on Lanai, for example, faced tremendous difficulty accessing care during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, doctor shortages also contributed to the rural healthcare challenges in our state and district. The VA Pacific Islands healthcare system has been actively working with the Pacific Basin Telehealth Resource Center at the University of Hawaii to increase these partnerships to expand telehealth across the state of Hawaii and the US affiliated Pacific Islands. And so I urge the committee to further support VA pilot programs that identify and do outreach to non-VA clinics in areas of high veteran populations for provider support and training in adoption of telehealth, as well as other technical assistance. As previously mentioned, Hawaii's large population of women and minority veterans. Women are the fastest growing cohort within the US veteran community at large. Programs like the Women's Veteran Network have demonstrated the effectiveness of peer support programs specifically designed for women veterans, and the VA requires additional peer support specialists to heighten access to similar programs and services tailored to the unique needs of women veterans. So I strongly support increasing the number of peer support specialists for women veterans at the VA. I'm also proud of Pacific Islanders, including our compact of freely associated states, our COFA, brothers and sisters enroll in the military at higher rates than the general population. So as we continue to celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month for the remainder of May, I believe that the federal government should do more to recognize these significant contributions of Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and US affiliated Pacific Islander service members and veterans. For example, the VA has centers and programs dedicated to rural populations and American Indian and Alaskan Natives, but there are no VA centers specifically dedicated to the population of Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and US API veterans. That is why I have requested funds to establish a VA center for Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and US affiliated Pacific Islander Health in my FY22 MILCON VA appropriations request. Finally, the late Senator Daniel K. Akaka was the first Native Hawaiian to serve in Congress. In the 109th Congress, Senator Akaka introduced legislation to establish an advanced leeward outpatient healthcare access, or ALOHA project, a VA primary care outpatient facility, kind of like a super CBOC facility, to service more than 87,000 veterans on the leeward or western side of Oahu. 16 years later, I'm proud to have helped take this project across the finish line. Now that the Aloha VA Center is finally approved for construction by Congress and has broken ground just weeks ago, I believe that the right thing to do is to honor the late Senator Akaka by renaming this facility the Daniel K. Akaka Department of Veterans Affairs Outpatient Center. Alongside Senator Hirono, we have introduced legislation to do exactly this. Senator Akaka was a World War II veteran, a tireless champion for Veterans Affairs during his 13 years in the U.S. House, 23 years in the U.S. Senate. He was the ranking member of the chairman on the Committee of Veterans Affairs in the Senate from the 109th Congress. And so for these reasons, I believe that Congress should honor and preserve the legacy of the late Senator Daniel K. Akaka and the significant accomplishments and his significant contributions and accomplishments to our country by designating the Aloha VA Center as the Daniel K. Akaka Department of Veterans Affairs Outpatient Center. Again, Chairwoman, mahalo for allowing me to testify before you today, and I look forward to working with all of you to advance these issues in your committee and these priorities. Mahalo.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you again for your advocacy. And with that, I will ask if Congressman Moore has any closing comments. I think we have concluded, Mr. Cahaley being our last testifier.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank all the members who took time to testify before our committee today. A little quick background, I did 6 years in the Army Guard, but growing up here at Fort Rucker, all my My buddies' dads were Vietnam era pilots. And so it's just a big part of who I was growing up and what impacted me. So this was my first member day, and I found the testimony to be moving and effective. Their efficiency on behalf of their veterans constituents is key to upholding sacred promises that we have made to all men and women who have and will serve. I look forward to continuing our work in Congress on behalf of them. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you so much, and I concur with all of your remarks, and I want to thank all of the members who came today to support very important issues. We thank you, and with that, this hearing is adjourned.